Okay, welcome back. This video is going to be about all the advanced features of the DX6 radio and how we'll use those advanced features in the Sport Cub aircraft. So to start with, we'll turn on the radio, and you always got to make sure you're on the right model. So is model number 3 Sport Cub. And the first thing we're going to do is go into the function list, scroll all the way down toward the bottom to the system setup, and we'll do the system setup first, the advanced system setup. So yes, caution is okay. So we've done the model type, the model name, the aircraft type, the flight mode setup. Okay, so flight mode setup allows you to have, with one single button, change all of the dual rates and anything else you want to change for a particular mode. So the I'm going to use 3 modes, and so the flight mode for launch, a flight mode for cruise, and a flight mode for landing. And I'm using those 3 terms because this radio knows how to speak those 3 words. So there'll be a launch mode, a cruise mode, and a landing mode. And the first thing we got to do is decide what switch to put it on. And the switch I'm going to use is this switch right here on the upper left side. It's let me see if you can see that there. Yes, it's labeled B, and it's the 3-position switch. So we're going to click on, using the roller here, we're going to click on flight mode setup, and right now it's in inhibit. So I want to change that to switch B, and it automatically knows it's a 3-position switch. And you can see if I move the switch to the bottom, it says flight mode 1, flight mode 2, and flight mode 3. So we have 3 flight modes on switch B. Now that's not good enough yet, so what we want to do is name those something better than flight mode 1, 2, and 3. That's what spoken flight mode is about. So I'm going to go to spoken flight mode and enter, scroll down to where it says flight mode 1 and click on it. And I'm going to change its name. Instead of flight mode 1, I'm going to hit the clear button twice, and then I'm going to call this launch mode. L A U. Okay, so there's launch mode. So we've edited the flight mode name, and I'll go roll the roller all the way back to the back button and hit the back button. Now we could test that. Well, first off, we want to change the speak. We don't want it to say mode 1, we want it to say launch. So launch is right after the mode names. Mode 10, and there's launch. I'll hit the test button so you can hear what it's going to sound like. We can turn the volume up on this a little bit, but I like it low so it doesn't bother other pilots, so I'm going to use that. Listen carefully.
Launch mode.
Launch mode, okay. So that's the back button. Go back to spoken flight mode, sorry. Now, so we're here. We've got the launch mode set, and I'm going to move the switch to the middle position, and it changes to flight mode 2. So we're going to do the same thing there. Hit the clear button, and we'll call this one cruise mode. Okay, and then we want this mode 2 to say cruise. And so there's launch mode, cruise mode. Test.
Cruise mode.
Okay. And then we go hit the button to the upper position, flight mode 3. We'll change that name, clear the name out, and we'll call this landing mode. Okay, so we got landing mode. Change mode 3 to land, and we'll test.
Landing mode. Landing mode.
Okay, so we got landing mode, cruise mode, launch mode. Okay, so that's the spoken flight mode and the spoken flight mode and the mode setup all done. Next, go to channel assignment. Okay, when channels are assigned to servos, they're fixed. That channel is dedicated to that servo. When a channel is not assigned to a servo, it's free to do lots of other nifty things. So we have two channels, the gear channel and the aux1 channel on the 6-channel receiver, which are not being used. So we're going to do a channel assignment of those. So you can see throttle, aileron, elevator, gear, and aux1 are the two channels that are going to be free. And so in the next case, we can assign a switch to these. So the gear channel, I'm going to use to assign switch H to it, and switch H is going to be for the trainer mode. So when we want to have the DX6 be the master to the slave box, which will be the DX5, we're going to flip switch H. Switch H is right back here. It's a 2-position switch. And the reason we're going to assign it to a channel, you might not always have to do this, but we want to make sure that when you turn the radio on, we get a warning that if in fact that the switch is not in the instructor position. So the gear, we don't need a gear, so I'm going to assign it to switch H. Okay, and then for aux1, we're going to use a throttle hold. In an electric aircraft, you want to have a throttle hold so that when you turn the airplane on, the radio is going to not let that motor move even if you bump the throttle. That's very good safety precaution. So, and then we want to make sure that that's in a warning, which you'll see how to do that in a few minutes. So we're going to change aux1 to be the switch F. Now switch F is right here. It is a 2-position switch, so it will either be throttle cut or normal mode. So that's the 2 channel assignments for switches. And then next is the trim setup. Trim setup by default is fine. I'm not going to change anything. You can see what they are, but there's no reason to change any of that. Model Utilities allows you to create and delete and mess with your models. Don't need to do any of that right now. So now here's how we use the warnings. Okay, first off, we want a voice warning, and here's where if you leave the throttle up over 10%, then it's going to give you a warning and not let you turn the radio on. So that's what that warning is about. So in flight modes, we have mode 1 is launch, mode 2 is cruise, and mode 3 is land. So we want to make sure that in mode 2 and 3, flight mode 2 and 3, if we turn the radio on and that switch is in the wrong position, don't start flying because we want to launch in launch mode. So that's what that'll do. Okay, now on the channel, okay, we want the gear channel to give us a warning when it's let me make sure here, when it's over 0%. I'm going to stop a minute and make sure it's under or over because I'm not certain of that. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm back, and I had to verify the settings in my DX9 radio because DX9 and this DX6 radio have almost identical programming in many respects, although the DX9 has some very unique features that I enjoy too. So to do the warnings correctly, we're going to do the gear channel first. And remember, we assigned the gear channel to switch H, and that's going to be for the trainer mode. So we're going to go to the gear channel, and that needs to be under 10%. Then for the aux1 channel, that needs to be over 0%. Okay, so gear under 10%, aux1 over 0%. And what I'm going to do is show you how that works. So I'm going to turn this back to the main screen. I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to flip 3 switches. I'm going to flip this switch to landing mode. I'm going to flip the F switch to be no throttle hold, and I'm going to flip this switch to be in trainer mode. And so I'm going to turn on the radio, and you'll see and listen to all the warnings.
Warning, landing mode. Warning, servo under 10%. Warning, servo over 0%.
Okay, so I'm going to turn the landing mode to launch mode.
Launch mode.
I'm going to flip the
Servo under 10%. Warning, servo over 0%.
I'm going to switch the F switch so the throttle hold is on, and then I'm going to flip the H switch so that we're in
Under 10%.
instructor mode. So that forces us to make sure that all the switches are in the right direction. So that's in launch mode, that one's in throttle hold, and that one is in instructor mode. And so that's what warnings are about. Okay, so next, go back into system setup. So that was warnings. Telemetry we'll do later. Pre-flight setup and frame race we don't need. Trainer I'll do later in a separate video on how to do trainer. So that's all of the system settings. Okay, and now we'll go to the main screen and to the function list. Now the servo setup was all right. The travel at 100% is all we need, and the no sub trims are going to be needed, and reversing has already been done. So we can back out of that. So DR and Expo, I want the DR and Expo on the, first of all, make sure you understand what DR and Expo is. DR stands for dual rate, and Expo means exponential. This little line here is a straight line. So the when you move the stick, it moves in a straight line, basically. Exponential means we change that curve a little bit around the center to make it more sensitive in the center when you're close to the middle of the range of an elevator or aileron or rudder. And so that's what we're going to change. To do that, the first thing we're going to do is turn the switch on, instead of on, to flight mode 1. Okay, so I got flight mode 1,
cruise mode, landing mode,
flight mode 2 and 3, launch mode. So on launch mode, we're going to start with the aileron in launch mode to be at 70%, because that's the default we were flying with, and for dual rates. Now on Expo, we didn't have Expo on the DX5, but Expo here, I'm going to use a 20% Expo. And so watch this curve go from a straight line. Okay, there's a straight line. If I bend it a lot, you can see that curve moving. So I like about 20% Expo. So we're going to use 20% Expo. This is a personal preference, and you'll get to decide for yourself what you want. So that's aileron. Okay. Then for elevator, going to do the same thing. Oops. Turn it on flight mode 1. And so for flight mode 1, we want 70%. Expo 20. Okay, and then for rudder, we're going to do the same thing. Turn it on, flight mode 1, and 70% for the rudder. Expo 20. Now, don't make it negative Expo, make it a positive Expo. Positive 20%. And so now all three of those are set to 70 and 20. Okay. Then we'll go to flight mode 2.
landing mode,
Oops.
cruise mode,
Cruise mode. So on cruise mode, I'm going to let everything be 100%, but I want Expo as well. So I want 20% Expo at 100% in cruise. Now we're going to do a lot of heavy acrobatics, but it'll do some good acrobatics. So that's aileron at 20% and 100%. So elevator, we'll leave it 100%, change the Expo to 20. And rudder, we'll change its Expo to 20 and leave it at 100. Now, so those three are set. Now for landing mode, I usually have landing and takeoff, launch and landing to be different, but I'm going to start out with them being the same. Later on, if I decide that this aircraft needs to have a little bit different in takeoff versus landing, I'll do that, but for now they're just going to be the same. So in aileron, we want the dual rate down to 70. Expo 20. Elevator dual rate of 70. Expo of 20. Oops. I hit the wrong button. There we go. Expo of 20. And for rudder, dual rate of 70. Remember, dual rate is just limiting the throw of the, in this case, the rudder to 70% of its possible throw. And expo of 20.
Launch mode.
So launch mode 70, cruise mode 100, landing mode is 70, and 20% expo on all of those. Okay, so that's DR and expo. Now throttle cut, we want throttle cut, and you can see I've assigned it. I can assign it to any switch or have it inhibited. So in throttle cut, I want to use switch F. So with switch F, you can see what happens to the throttle here. Okay, so watch the throttle channel, and I'm going to flip the throttle cut off, and the throttle jumps up to its normal position of minus 100. So when you cut the throttle, it goes to minus 130 up here, and notice switch F is assigned to aux 1, and you see aux 1 going crazy there, 0 to 100, or minus 100, plus 100. So that's throttle cut. Throttle curve we don't need, mix we don't need, range test we'll do later. The timer, in this case I want the timer at 10 minutes. You saw in maiden flight number 3 we had plenty of time and battery left at 8 minutes. I'm going to go 10 minutes, and after 10 minutes I get the warning that we're time to land, and so you got 2 minutes of plenty of time to land. Personal choice for you. Okay. In this case, the timer should start when the throttle stick is moved over 100%. One time is going to be active. If you don't do that, then every time you pull the throttle idle, the clock stops. So I want it to be a one-time thing. First time I move the throttle, the clock's going to count down 10 minutes no matter what happens to the throttle. In the next sequence, next button, every minute I want it to tell me something. So I want it to have a voice countdown every minute. At 1 minute I can have a tone or a voice. I guess I'll use a voice. 30 seconds I want to have a voice. 10 seconds to 0. Expiration, I want it to really notice it, so I'm going to turn it on voice as well. And every minute excuse me, every minute up will be a voice. So it's going to talk to me a whole lot. Okay, and this allows you to control having a tone when it starts, stops, and resets, which is just fine. So the timer is countdown 10 minutes, starts when the stick moves over 25%, and so we're going to get a voice for most of the timer events. Okay, so telemetry will be a separate video entirely dedicated to telemetry. Now, in the system setup, in the custom voice setup, each time the F button moves, I want it to tell me something. Okay, so I'm going to do a switch change report. So the switch is F. Okay, and so switch F is controlling the throttle cut. So in position 0, I want that to be just sort of normal mode. In position 1, I want it to tell me throttle cut. Somewhere in here there's a throttle cut, throttle trim position. There it is. So throttle cut. Okay.
Normal mode. Throttle cut. Normal mode. Throttle cut.
Okay, so normal mode and throttle cut. And that's the custom voice setup. Okay, I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back here at the main menu, and I just want to test a few things, make sure everything's working. So I'm going to move the, let me roll out here a little bit. So I'm going to move the throttle, and if it once I'll move it up slowly, and when it hits 25%, you heard the timer start going, and there goes the timer. Now if I pull the throttle back to idle, the timer's still going. So that's working. The launch, cruise,
Mode. Landing mode.
the
Launch.
3 mode switches are working. Other switches don't do anything. Throttle cut over here.
Normal mode. Throttle cut.
This switch up here doesn't do anything. And in a separate video, I'm going to show you all about buddy boxes and how to set them up and that kind of stuff. So although switch H is set up, in that video we'll actually have it talk to us to tell us what mode we're in terms of training. So that's it for the advanced setup, and then we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.
Time remaining 9 minutes.
And there's your warning, time remaining 9 minutes.